Hey guys, welcome to my episode 5 review of the Halo TV series, and as you guys can see from the title, this was easily the best episode yet. The reason for that is quite simple. It features Master Chief and Silver Team actually kicking ass against the Covenant, but more importantly, we can see the Covenant being a massive threat to the UNSC, because this episode really demonstrated the brutality of the Covenant. And to sum it up for you guys, this episode felt like pure Halo. This is exactly what we need to see more of in the series going forward. Episode 5 is the shortest episode so far, yet it was the most memorable. Seriously, I walked away from this episode thinking, wow, that was actually pretty darn cool. The episode does have its weird moments, but I really enjoyed the opening, which had Catherine Halsey and Jacob Keyes discovering John for the first time, and it was very similar to how Halsey discovered John in the books. The only difference was that John wasn't actually fighting the kids, he was helping a kid. I believe that's correct. I haven't read Fall of Reach in ages, but I do believe that's correct. And then basically the plot of this episode is that the UNSC are trying to move the Forerunner artifact onto their main ship. Just before that happens, the Covenant arrive. Now, we do see more scenes of Quan and Soren and Madrigal, and there was that one moment where I was just like, how is she able to do that? How is she able to break free from the chains? You know, just using a rock. But I'm very pleased we saw barely any of her. I know that sounds terrible, but seeing more of Chief, you know, and Silver Team versing the Covenant was the highlight of this episode. And that is absolutely the direction the Halo TV series should be going in. Now it's time to talk about the highlight of the episode. And that of course was the final 10 minutes featuring the Covenant. Right off the bat, we can see the Covenant destroy the UNSC frigate in the air. It goes down extremely quickly, so I guess we can assume that a bunch of Banshees just fired a lot of Banshee bombs at it. Plus there is a massive Covenant cruiser, which probably dealt a lot of damage off screen. We do get a close-up of the Banshees, and man, they look fantastic. They sport the Reach model, and I'm going to say it very much makes sense, and they look great. One thing I did notice though is that the Banshee bomb itself is blue, not green. Slight change, I'm honestly not too fussed by that, but that's just something small I thought I'd note. I have to say, one bit I really enjoyed throughout this entire episode was the dialogue between Chief and Cortana. They're still learning how to work together, and I reckon come season 2, we'll probably have a relationship very similar to what we got in the Halo games. So you can see it's going in that direction. Okay, now this is a really cool part. We got to see the Grunts and Jackals for the first time in the Halo TV series, and man, they look fantastic. They came out of the Covenant drop pods, and their entrance was really well done too. And we have to talk about the Grunt hijacking the Warthog. That was such a funny scene, but then Chief jumps up and says, mind if I drive, and then kicks the Grunt out. That whole sequence I really enjoyed, and just before that we saw a Needler super combine on the Marine, and that looks so good. And as soon as I saw that, I said to myself, this is exactly what I wanted to see. It shows how dangerous the Covenant are, as well as their weaponry. After this, a Phantom appears, and we can see some Jackals that are wielding these mini energy swords, or energy blades. I'll try to show you guys an image, but it weirdly enough looks like a tiny energy sword. Nonetheless, it looked really cool, and that scene with the Jackal tearing up like 4 or 5 Marines was so well done. Then we can see Kai getting shot by tons of plasma fire. She basically halts and looks around at everything going on. This is definitely happening because she took out her pellet, which was suppressing her emotions. Now she's trying to take everything in, what's happening to her, and she would have died for it if it wasn't for her energy shielding on her armor, and that in itself looked really nice. And Chief seeing this causes him to go help out his fellow Spartan, and this sequence was fucking badass. He jumps off the Warthog and basically hijacks the Banshee and steers it right into a Phantom, and I have to say this was the coolest part of the episode. It's exactly how a Spartan would take out a Banshee, and it did remind me of Carter from Halo Reach, basically going down with the ship. Of course, Chief walks away just fine. When the Phantom explodes, we can see what looks like the remains of some Grunts and Jackals, and one of the Jackals has half his body blown off, and you can see his intestines just hanging out the other side, and I've got to say, just seeing this kind of bloodshed and carnage on the screen was honestly awesome. There was one other weird bit here, where an elite is actually punching Kai instead of using a plasma rifle or an energy sword to finish her off. That's just plot armor, and I did find that a little odd, because, you know, any elite would have just been wielding some sort of weapon to use in that scenario, but still, Chief runs over and bashes the hell out of that elite. Okay, now the final thing I want to highlight is the brute coming down from the spirit. I have to say, I was actually quite worried to see how they would, you know, interpret the brutes, or show us the brutes, and holy crap, they nailed the brutes, or at least this brute. We've got no clue if it's Tartarus, or someone as high as Tartarus in terms of ranking in the Covenant, but this very well could be Tartarus, and I have to say, he looked incredible. The brute looks very similar to how Atriox looked in the Halo Wars 2 cutscenes. I don't know if that's just me, or if you guys were getting the same kind of vibe there, but the brute did feel like something out of a Blur cutscene. Looked fantastic, and easily one of the highlights of this episode. Now, as you guys can tell, I'm going to give this episode a much higher rating than the previous episodes. So for me, episode 5 is going to get an 8 out of 10. That may seem extremely high for a lot of you guys, but I think the last 10 minutes just really elevated that score for me, and I've got to say, I was really stunned by what we saw. There were cheesy parts and weird bits of dialogue, but overall, I really did enjoy this episode, and it is easily the best episode in the series so far. With that said, guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We are so close to 20,000 subscribers, and your help would be very much appreciated on the road there. With that said, I'll catch you all in the next video. Have a good one.